Have you ever experienced that eerie moment when you're absolutely certain something was one way, only to find out it's completely different? Welcome to our exploration of the Mandela Effect, a phenomenon where large groups of people share the same false memories. For many of us, the beloved family of bears we grew up reading about has always been called the Berenstain bears. Yet, a surprising number of people swear it was once spelled with an E instead of an A. The official title, as confirmed by the creators, is undeniably Berenstain. So why do so many people, including myself, remember it differently? Some experts believe that our brains lean towards phonetic spelling, subconsciously replacing the usual stain ending with the more familiar stein. Over time, this altered memory becomes so ingrained that it feels as real as the original. This discrepancy has sparked debates among psychologists and pop culture enthusiasts, making the Berenstain mystery one of the most iconic examples of the Mandela Effect. Next up, step into the world of classic cartoons, and you might recall a title that seems to roll off the tongue as Looney Tunes. However, if you check the official archives, the beloved series is called, well, Looney Tunes, just spelled a little differently. This confusion likely stems from the term toons, T-O-O-N-S, a casual abbreviation for cartoons, which seems to have seeped into our collective memory. The subtle shift in spelling highlights how language and familiarity can alter our recollections. The misremembering isn't just about letters, it taps into the way our minds work when recalling popular culture. Despite the widespread belief in the T-O-O-N-S spelling, every piece of evidence from vintage posters to official merchandise confirms that the classic series has always been Looney Tunes, T-U-N-E-S. Imagine picturing the Fruit of the Loom logo in your mind. A cluster of fruits spilling out of a cornucopia. For many, this is the image that comes naturally, yet if you look at the official logo, you'll notice something strange. There is no cornucopia at all. The fruits appear on a plain background, and the cornucopia is simply a phantom of our collective memory. The phenomenon might be explained by our cultural association of abundance with cornucopias, which are frequently seen in art and advertising, but despite numerous claims and even reboots of the brand, the company has consistently maintained that a cornucopia was never part of the original design. This intriguing discrepancy forces us to wonder how shared symbols can be so vividly misremembered. I could have swore that there's a cornucopia in there. Monopoly is a game many of us have enjoyed or fought with our family for hours over, and one character stands out, of course, the suave, top-hatted tycoon known as Mr. Monopoly. A curious detail that persists in many people's memories is that he sports a monocle. Yet if you examine every official piece of Monopoly artwork, you don't find a trace of that accessory. This false memory might have been influenced by other iconic figures who do wear monocles, leading to a blending of images in our mind, but the idea of the monocled Monopoly man is so entrenched that even die-hard fans express shock upon learning the truth. This case perfectly illustrates how our brains can insert details that feel natural but have absolutely no basis in reality, challenging us to scrutinize what we know to be true. In the epic saga of Star Wars, a few characters are as memorable as C-3PO, the ever-anxious protocol droid. Many fans vividly remember him as being entirely gold. However, a closer look at the films reveal that C-3PO actually sports a silver leg, a detail that's easy to miss during the heat of intergalactic battles. This subtle design choice was intentional from the very beginning, adding a layer of realism to the droid's construction. Despite this, the dominant memory of an all-golden droid persists, perhaps because our minds focus on his overall gleam rather than the nuance of his design. This Mandela Effects reminds us that even in our most cherished cinematic universes, tiny details can be overlooked or forgotten, altering our perception of a character we thought we knew inside out. If you've ever dived into the lore of Star Wars, you've likely heard the iconic misquote, "Luke, I am your your father. In reality, the line delivered by Darth Vader is, "No, I am your father." This misquotation has become so widespread that it's often repeated in pop culture despite its inaccuracy. The error might have been perpetuated by its dramatic cadence and how it encapsulates the shock of the revelation. This instance shows how a slight twist in wording can take on a life of its own, morphing into a cultural phenomenon that feels as definitive as any official script. It is a reminder of how our memories, no matter how fervently held, can stray from the truth, rewriting even the most legendary moments in film history. Calling all Pokemon fans, this one might ruffle some fur. Many remember Pikachu, the franchise's mascot, as having a black tip at the end of his tail. Yet, if you glance at official artwork and merchandise, Pikachu's tail is uniformly yellow. This discrepancy has baffled many, with some suggesting that early promotional images or fan art might have influenced our collective memory. While the official design has always been clear, the persistence of the black tip memory highlights just how powerful and malleable our recollections can be. It's a fascinating example of the Mandela effect at work in modern pop culture, where even a tiny detail in a globally recognized character can spark debate and mystery among fans. So I ask you, which are you? Team Yellowtail or Team Blacktip? Let me know down below in the comments. Oh, we're having fun here on Most Amazing Top 10. When you picture Sherlock Holmes, what comes to mind? Chances are you envision the brilliant detective sporting a deerstalker hat. Surprisingly, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's original stories barely mention any headgear at all. The image of Holmes in that distinctive hat was popularized by illustrators and later adaptations, becoming a permanent part of his iconography. This phenomenon is a classic example of how media can reshape historical figures in our collective memory. The deerstalker hat, though not a creation of Conan Doyle, has become so closely associated with Holmes that it now defines his visual identity for millions of fans. This Mandela effect illustrates how powerful imagery can override written details, permanently altering our understanding of well-known characters. Ever found yourself silently correcting the name of the familiar household product? Many people recall the brand as Febreze, with an extra E in the middle, yet the correct spelling is F-E-B-R-E-Z-E. This subtle difference has led to countless debates and head scratches. The confusion may stem from the way we naturally pronounce the word, or from how similar sounding words are stored in our memory, but despite extensive marketing and packaging that reaffirms the proper spelling, this small error in recollection continues to baffle consumers. The Febreze Mandela effect is a reminder that even the most mundane aspects of our everyday lives, like cleaning products, our brains can play tricks on us, making us question what we thought we knew about something as simple as a brand name. But I'm gonna be honest, on this one, I think that the brand is wrong. Febreze. Febreze. If we're gonna say it Febreze, it should have 2 E's in it. I'll write a strongly worded email later to the Febreze team. Our final Mandela effect takes us to the world of art. When you gaze at Leonardo da Vinci's masterpiece, the Mona Lisa, you might recall her having delicate, defined eyebrows and some lashes even. Yet a close examination of the painting reveals that these features are either extremely faint or absent altogether. Some art historians argue that the eyebrows may have faded over time, or that Da Vinci intentionally left them minimalistic. Others suggest that our memory fills in the gaps, influenced by countless reproductions or our own expectations of what a portrait should look like. This peculiar discrepancy has fueled debates among experts and enthusiasts, making it one of the more mystifying examples of the Mandela effect. It changes not only our perception of art, but also the reliability of our visual memory, urging us to look twice at even the most familiar images.
One of the most famous scenes in The Matrix is the big revelation between Morpheus and Neo, where Morpheus sits Neo down and gives him the option of taking the red or blue pill. Now, everyone swears that Morpheus's speech starts off with him saying, "Now what if I told you?" followed by the speech, "The Matrix is everywhere. It's all around us. Even now, in this very room. You can see it when you look out your window, or when you turn on your television. You can feel it when you go to work. when you go to church, when you pay your taxes. It is the world that's been pulled over your eyes to blind you from the truth. Now, most of these lines are all actually in the movie, all except one. The very first line, that "what if I told you" part. Fans will swear up and down that Morpheus says that line, but it's not in the movie. And given the plot of The Matrix, it just makes this Mandela effect all the more unsettling. Next up, we have another one of the most famous lines in cinematic history, although this one does exist, although not exactly in the form everyone says it does. Life is like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're gonna get. People quote the line all the time. People write it out in quotes and articles about the movie, but as it turns out, the line doesn't go exactly like that. Forrest actually says, "Mama always said life was like a box of chocolates." Okay? Now, later in the movie, you do see his mom say life is a box of chocolates, but not life is like a box of chocolates. Kind of easy to see how this one gets all confused, right? But, I mean, for such a famous line, it's crazy how many people get it wrong. Also kind of crazy to me how famous the line is in general. It's not a great line, I don't think. I mean, I know what I'm gonna get in a box of chocolates. Chocolate of some kind. The flavors are different, yeah, whatever, but they're all relatively the same size. They're all chocolate. Life's more like a bag of trail mix. Most of it's boring, but occasionally you get something sweet. They put M&Ms in there. This is the Fruit of the Loom logo, or is it? We're gonna play a little game with the logo Mandela effects on this list. I'll show you a picture of the logos. You guess whether it's the accurate one or the false memory. Leave your results down in the comments. So, did the Fruit of the Loom logo look like this? No, it did not. Turns out there's no cornucopia in the back. The logo actually looks like this, or at least it does now, whether you believe in the altered timeline thing or not. This is one I could have sworn it looked different. It just looks so plain with the cornucopia missing. So what's going on here? Are we just remembering it differently? Is our current timeline being altered? Are different timelines converging? Are we trapped in a virtual world that's glitching? Again, share your thoughts down below. Alright, next logo in our Mandela Effect game. Take a second to examine this Cheez-It logo here. Is this the right one? If you guessed yes, then you are actually right. This is the actual Cheez-It logo, but many people, including myself, thought it looked more like this, with the Z on the end. Cheez-Its, not Cheez-It. Cheez-Its just sounds snackier, if that's a real word. Now, the obvious explanation for this one is that people will often say it plural when speaking out loud. You're not gonna be like, hey, pass me the box of Cheez-It. You're gonna say Cheez-Its. So people might just have it in their minds that it's Cheez-Its, but that's the strange part. Look at pretty much every food product. Maybe not every one, but most of them. There's usually an S on the end for this reason. Skittles, Mentos, Fruit Loops, Doritos, Fritos, Tostitos, Lay's. If the name of the product is the food itself and not a family or like company name, like Nestle, it's usually in plural. So why Cheez-It? Just feels awkward. Well, maybe because it was actually different before. We move on to a Star Wars Mandela effect now, and no, I'm not referring to the Luke I am your father thing that's been talked about to death. I'm referring to C-3PO's silver leg, because yes, he has one. The lower part of one of his legs is silver, and apparently always has been. Now, this is not one of George Lucas's many pointless updates. It's apparently just always like this. Now, I watched the original Star Wars movies a lot when I was a kid, not as much as Star Trek, but fair amount, and I never recall C-3PO having any silver on his body. Like, his whole thing was that he's this elegant looking gold robot. All the toys of C-3PO, none of them had a silver part of the leg. The new ones do, but not back in the day. You'd think that would be a pretty obvious detail to include though, wouldn't you? Now, I want to say this one might have something to do with the fact that we used to watch Star Wars at home on smaller screens and lower VHS quality. Once the movies were remastered and stuff, everything got more clear, but I mean in the 70s on the big screen, no one noticed the silver part of his leg, really? I don't know. What do you Star Wars nuts have to say about this one? Do you remember the silver or not? One of the most recognizable cartoon characters in history is Mickey Mouse. In fact, I think he is the most recognizable. All you need to see are those ears and you automatically think Mickey Mouse in Disney. But there's a detail that a number of people seem to forget. yet, his tail. Yes, this one is the polar opposite of the famous Curious George Mandela effect. In case you didn't know, Curious George actually does not have a tail. Mickey Mouse does though. Makes sense that he has a tail, considering he's a mouse, but you also have the whole Goofy and Pluto both being dogs thing, so realism really isn't the focus in this universe. Now, to be fair, Mickey doesn't have a tail in every single depiction, but pretty much every major one. And I don't know about you, but I just don't picture it when I think of the character. It's not a new thing either. Way back in Mickey's very first appearance, he has the tail. Next up, we have this image here of a delicious Kit Kat bar. Look at that, just a nice tasty snack, classic red packaging, logo looks in order, right? What do you think? No, this image has been photoshopped. The real logo looks like this. No hyphen between the kit and the cat. And just like everything on this list, apparently that's always been the case. So many people remember there being a hyphen though. How I'd love to go back in time, walk into a convenience store, just to confirm if that were the case. I'd also grab a Kit Kat Chunky peanut butter, because I don't think they make them anymore. And those things were spectacular. What color is Carmen Sandiego's outfit? Most people would just say red and leave it at that, but if you're like me, you also have this strange memory of seeing Carmen Sandiego in a yellow outfit as well. In fact, there are lots of people who remember this. Only no one can find any depiction of her having ever worn a yellow coat or hat. Here are a couple comments from Redditors. I remember the show, the cartoon back in the late 90s, and I could swear on a stack of holy Bibles the size of Mount Everest that Carmen Sandiego used to wear a yellow hat and yellow trench coat. Here's another. The PC game was played in class, 88-89. My teacher would play it in front of class while everyone in the room played along with open dialogue. I remember the logo screen and her wearing her yellow trench coat and matching hat. I also remember her on the TV show in the same yellow. Comments like this go on and on. So what is going on here? Some people will say that we're getting things confused with Dick Tracy, who famously wears all yellow, but I mean, Dick Tracy, really? They're both very different characters. I mean, Dick Tracy is a comic strip about a detective that came out in the 1930s. Carmen Sandiego is a series of PC games about a female globe-trotting thief that came out in 1985. The only Dick Tracy thing anyone would have been super familiar with around this same time would have been the live-action Dick Tracy movie in 1990, and again, that was live action, so it would be odd that people would have blended it with a 2D animated character in their brains, but I mean, I guess it's possible. Before we get to the last point, let's finish off our Mandela Effect product game. This is an image of the Raisin Bran mascot. Look correct to you? Is something off? What do you think? Leave your comments down below. Well, this has actually been photoshopped. The Raisin Bran's son has never had sunglasses. Who else distinctly remembers him wearing a pair of shades though? Just feels right, doesn't it? And we finish off today with Pikachu's tail. This is the first Mandela effect that really hit me. I always thought I knew how Pikachu looked in my brain, but I remember first hearing about the whole Mandela effect phenomenon, and Pikachu was brought up along with an image just like this, and I was like, damn, yeah, I distinctly remember Pikachu having the black on the end of the tail. And no, I'm not talking about Pichu. Pichu has never been nearly as recognizable and popular as Pikachu. I even had a friend who swore they had a small Pikachu plush when they were kids with the black on the end of the tail, and it would have been before Pichu even showed up. So I don't know, am I saying this is a genuine altering of the timeline or something like that? Who's to say? All I know is there could be something to this one. The North settled in Greenland around the 10th century, creating a colony that lasted for about 500 years. But then, in the late 15th century, they vanished. Now, it's not like it was uncommon for people to relocate back then, but what was strange about this was that they'd left behind a lot of their supplies and belongings. It was like they just evaporated. Historians and archaeologists still haven't come up with a clear answer. But there are theories. One is that environmental changes made life too hard for them, forcing the settlers to leave. Another is that local Inuits may have raided the colony, killing or capturing the settlers, but there weren't any clear signs of an attack. Everything had been left in a pretty tidy manner. If the Inuit had raided the colony, there would have been signs of a struggle, but the site had been found neat and intact. There's also the theory that a plague in the late 15th century, which hit Iceland and Norway, left left many farms empty, meaning the Greenland settlers might have returned to Europe to claim the abandoned land, but that doesn't make much sense either. I mean, the Vikings back home would have known that these guys had returned. There wouldn't be much of a mystery, would there? This is a very strange case. Sacsayhuaman is an impressive Incan fort built in the 1400s, just outside Cusco, Peru. The fort is famous for its massive stone walls, made from stones that each weigh around 100 to 120 tons. What's even more amazing, though, is how these stones fit together, which is perfectly. They also have these smooth finishes, almost like they were melted and then hardened again in a giant kiln. But back then there was no way they could have had a kiln big enough to do something like that. Researchers have been trying to figure out how the Incas managed to mold these stones for years. Some think they might have used mirrors or glass to focus sunlight and heat the stones until they were soft enough to fit together, but there's no evidence of a method like that having been used. Others have theorized that the stones may have been rough at first and then natural fires partially melted them together, but tests have shown that regular fires don't really get hot enough to melt the stone. Here's a theory for you. Maybe the Incas had some kind of a deal with a race of stone carving aliens. I had to do it. In Jordan and Syria, there are mysterious stone circles spread across the desert plains. Some of these circles are huge. The smallest is about 720 feet wide, and the largest is more than 1,450 feet across. They're all between 3 and 5 feet high, and none of them have any openings or entrances, which is strange because if they'd been used to, say, house animals, you'd think there'd be doors or gates. By that same token, they don't really seem to have been used as burial sites either. The circles are incredibly well formed, though, almost perfectly round, which is surprising given how old they are. Archaeologists think they were built between 4500 BC and 2000 BC, a span of about 2500 years, which really doesn't narrow down their purpose much. Researchers believe there were once even more of these strange stone circles, but many have been destroyed as new towns and settlements were built. Scientists are still trying to figure out why they were used and who built them. There's also a strange circle of stones in Miami. In 1998, while preparing to build new condos in South Beach, developers came across something they'd never seen before. As they were tearing down old buildings and digging deep into the ground, they discovered a circle of 24 large holes, each filled with heavy limestone tablets. This discovery was so unusual that they had to call in archaeologists to investigate. The archaeologists found that these stones were arranged in a perfect circle, about 38 feet across. They also uncovered other ancient items like animal bones, shark teeth, and old axe heads made of basalt rock. After studying the area, the experts estimated that the Miami Circle was about 2,000 years old. The circle is believed to have been created by the Tequesta people, a tribe that lived in the region until the early 18th century. The Tequesta were known to be nomadic. Today, the Miami Circle sits right in the middle of the city. Researchers are still studying the site and the artifacts, but the purpose of the circle and even a lot about the Tequesta themselves still a mystery. Alright, this story is one of the wildest and most mysterious tales from World War II. So in October of 1943 at the Philadelphia Naval Shipyard, the Navy was working on a top secret project to make ships invisible to enemy radar. The ship at the center of all this was the USS Eldridge. The story goes that they were using some kind of high-tech equipment involving powerful electromagnetic fields. When they turned on this equipment, something bizarre happened. The ship disappeared. Not just off radar, but physically vanished from sight. Some say it was teleported to Norfolk, Virginia, and then brought back to Philadelphia in just a few minutes. But the strangest part is what happened to the crew. When the ship reappeared, some sailors had been fused into the ship's metal. Others had gone missing entirely. The tale first came about in 1955 when a man named Carl Allen, who claimed to be a witness, sent a series of letters to a U.S. Navy research organization and a UFO researcher. Of course, the Navy denies that the experiment ever took place, and the letters are often chalked up to a very creative hoax. But there is a small chance something really did happen that day. I mean, hey, who knows? none of us were there. The story of John Zagreus is often referenced as one of the eeriest examples of an alternate reality crossing over into our own, at least in some versions of the story. Anyway, yeah, this one falls into the realm of urban legends, but it is a pretty great story all the same. The story goes that in 1954, at Tokyo's Haneda Airport, a man handed over his passport, leaving the officials in utter confusion. His passport was from a country called Taured. If you're wondering what Taured is, well, it doesn't exist. They looked at the man, and he seemed completely normal. He was well dressed and polite, but he insisted that Taured was a real country located between France and Spain, and he was shocked when the officials told him that that place just didn't exist. The man had other documents too, like a driver's license and bank statements, all from this place called Taured. His passport even had stamps showing he had traveled to other countries before. The officials were just completely baffled. They checked maps and globes, and they were like, are we just crazy? But no, there was no Taured. They put him in a nearby hotel while they investigated further, and they posted guards outside his room just to make sure he didn't leave. But when they went in to check on him the next morning, he'd disappeared. The room was on a high floor, no balcony, and the guards swore they didn't see or hear anything strange during the night. His documents also disappeared, leaving no trace of the mysterious man from Taured. No one could figure out where he came from or where he went. So where does John Zagreus come into the picture? Well, there is a documented case of a foreign man being detained in Japan for identity fraud, but it's never been 100% verified if John Zagreus' story spawned the legend of the Taured man or if his case was completely unrelated. All right, y'all know I love my cryptids, and these just might be the coolest cryptids I've ever heard of, neo-dinosaurs. I had never heard about these till fairly recently. These are exactly what they sound like, sightings of dinosaurs in modern times. And yes, there have been multiple sightings of these things in the Amazon basin, in Bolivia, Colombia, Peru, and Brazil. The most common type of neo-dinosaur reported in the Amazon is a large, long-necked amphibious animal that looks a lot like a sauropod. Then there are ones that look like iguanodons, and less frequently bipedal reptiles similar to Allosaurus. There have been tracks discovered that look like dinosaur-type footprints and actual sightings of the creatures themselves, if you can believe it, which most of you I'm sure can't. Fair play. One of the famous tales of these creatures comes from the British archaeologist and explorer Percy Fawcett. That's the guy who claimed to have found the lost city of Z. He claimed to have found these three-toed tracks in the forests of Brazil, and a friend of Fawcett claimed to have seen a large, long-necked reptile near the Brazil-Bolivia border. There were also reports of an iguanodon-like creature in Colombia in 1921, and a Brazilian named Alvaro Mesquita reported encountering a camptosaur-like animal on the shore of a swampy lake between the Purus River and the Juara River. And even as recently as 1995, geology students in Brazil's Sincora Mountains reported seeing two large creatures about 30 feet long with 8-foot necks and tails bathing in a river. Very bizarre. And I can understand why some people may not believe this. I just think it's a really cool idea. One of the most awe-inspiring and well-documented UFO sightings came in 1997. It was March 13th in Arizona, a clear, starry night. People were just going about their usual business when, out of nowhere, strange lights started to appear in the sky. And no, they were not stars. First, there was this V-shaped formation of 5 lights slowly gliding across the state. The lights were first spotted in the town of Henderson, Nevada, around 7:55 p.m., and from there they made their way to Arizona, passing over Prescott and heading towards Phoenix. As the lights moved, more and more people saw them. Hundreds, maybe even thousands, looked up and saw this weird, silent, glowing formation. Some folks described it as a massive, solid object blocking out the stars as it passed. The police were flooded with reports. Phone lines were lighting up in news and radio stations, and the odd V-shaped craft wasn't the only one reported. A police officer in Paulden, Arizona would report seeing a cluster of orange-colored lights. And later, around 10 p.m., there were a number of reports in the Phoenix area of a row of brilliant lights hovering in the sky, or slowly falling. It later came out that the Air National Guard had been carrying out test flights that night, but people were skeptical, and till this day, people still don't buy the official explanation. As for why that is, well, we could do a whole video on this case, but essentially, the military said one of the light formations was a plane, and the other sets of lights were flares, and it just didn't look like that. The story of the Ourang Medan is one of the creepiest and most mysterious sea tales out there. It all started in 1947 when a distress call came in from a Dutch freighter named the SS Ourang Medan. The message: all officers, including the captain, are dead. Lying in chart room and bridge, possibly whole crew dead. Then there was some garbled Morse code, followed by the final words, "I die," which has always creeped me out. Rescue ships were quickly sent to check things out. When they boarded the ship, though, they found that the entire crew was indeed dead. Their bodies were scattered around the ship. Their faces were frozen in expressions of pure terror, and their arms were reaching out like they'd been trying to fight something off. There were no signs of physical injuries, though. The rescuers didn't have much time to figure things out either. Shortly after they arrived, a fire broke out in the ship's cargo hold. They had to abandon the vessel, which then exploded, sinking into the depths of the ocean. And another one of the most mysterious maritime tales in history is, of course, the case of the Mary Celeste. On December 4th of 1872, a ship called the Mary Celeste was found floating in the Atlantic Ocean. It was found completely empty of people anyway. All the cargo, the food supplies, and the crew's belongings, they were all still in place. All that was missing was a single lifeboat. The Mary Celeste had left New York about a month earlier, led by Captain Benjamin Briggs. He was traveling with his wife, his young daughter, and 7 crew. The ship was headed for Italy. Now, everything seemed normal during the journey, and that's because we have the log entries. The last entry in the logbook, too, was just a regular note about the ship's position and weather. There were no clues in these logs about any sign of trouble. There was no sign of a struggle or any kind of damage to the ship. It looked like everyone had just calmly left in the lifeboat. But why? The weather was fine, the ship was in good shape. It was unlikely that pirates had attacked either, because again, nothing had been stolen, and there were no signs of violence. To this day, nobody knows what happened to Captain Briggs, his family, or the crew.